Hi Hawks, it's Miss Bingham and we are going to learn today about how to reflect and think about our work and also talk about our work with others. So let's take a look. So in the virtual art studio, we are learning that we can describe why I chose to make something, what I used to make it, and how I made it. And today we're going to make something and then practice talking about it. So when you're talking about your creative process, it's important to give the person listening information about what it was like to create your work. So you're kind of creating a story for them about creating your art. So in that story, it's important to include what you made and what you used. And we can use first, next, and last to make sure that we talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. So, an example of what that might look like or sound like. So this is a piece of art that was created by a hawk at Hortons Creek, and the way that he could talk about his work is by saying that he drew a giraffe with pencil. Next, he colored the giraffe orange with orange marker. And last, he added a grass and sun using green marker and yellow marker. So notice how he talked about what he drew and what he used in each step in his art process. Here's another example of a piece of art created by a hawk and how they might talk about their process and their art supplies. They say, first, I drew a cat using pencil. Next, I added tie-dye colors using marker. And last, I filled in the corner with some colors using watercolor paints. So notice how they talked about the beginning, the middle, and the end of their process and talked about which art supplies they use for different parts. So here's another example of another piece of art created by a hawk. They might, if somebody asked them what they made and how they made it, they might say something like, first, I drew a dinosaur using pencil. Next, I added bushes and trees using markers. And last, I colored in the sky using blue colored pencil. So we're gonna spend a little bit of time right now making something new. We are learning to make our own ideas. Making our own ideas is tricky, and sometimes we get stuck, and that's why we are practicing taking ideas from our head and turning them into a project. So right now, you're gonna have about 5 minutes to work. You need to make sure that you have some paper, something to put your idea on, something to draw your idea with, and something to add color. And you will make that decision as the artist, what materials or art supplies work best for you and your idea. So you can use any idea you want. You can make anything that you want right now. It is your time to express yourself in the unique way that is most special to you. If you have something that you've already started making and you haven't had time to finish it, you could take that out and finish it up, or you could choose to make something new, but this is your time to make something. So I'm gonna play some music for you and you're gonna have time to make your art. I will let you know when it's time to stop. right, Hawks, it is time to stop and look at our art and talk about what we made. So maybe you have somebody else with you in your space, and maybe you are in the room by yourself. So it's important that we have an opportunity to practice talking about what we made. So if you have somebody with you in the space, maybe a grown-up, maybe a sibling, maybe a stuffed animal, or something like that, you can tell them the answers to these questions that I'm about to ask using your voice out loud. If you are by yourself and you do not have another person with you, you can use the strength of your imagination to pretend that you're telling someone. So maybe you can have a stuffed animal that you tell, or a pet that you tell, or you tell somebody who maybe you have an imaginary friend that lives in your head that you could tell. You could pretend like someone is there and say it out loud. So I'm going to ask you some questions and I want you to say the answers. So let's look at what we created. I want you to think about when you first got out your paper and I said it's time to make something. You chose an art supply to pick up with your hand to get started. What was the first art supply that you picked up when you first got started? Go ahead and answer. Okay, and when you first used that art supply, what was the first part of your picture that you drew first? Okay, and then you probably added some more details. Maybe you switched art supplies. Did you stay and use the same art supply for the entire picture, or did you use more than one? Tell the person with you. And when you used that art supply, if you switched art supplies, what did you add with that art supply? What else did you add to your picture? What was the next thing you drew? Okay. And then right before I asked you to stop, there was probably the last thing that you added before we stopped today. What was the last thing you added, and what did you use to add it? Was it a crayon? Was it a colored pencil? Was it a marker? Tell the person with you what was the last thing you did before we stopped. All right. So at this point, you should have had some time to practice talking out loud about your process and your materials. You made some important decisions about what to draw today, what materials to use, and what steps to take to make your picture. And it's important for us to be able to talk about that process with those around us. So great job. So there's going to be an opportunity for you to show us what you made on the next slide. So go ahead and stop the video and go to the next part of the slideshow to find out how to share your work.